Hello, hello, and welcome to the second Making It with Music speed build. There's been some life changes for Wyatt since the last speed build. He and Gina had a surprise baby, Elena, thanks to Risky Woohoo. The flimsy excuse of getting married for money finally gave way, and they argued more and more as Wyatt finally got his head out of his music and realized that Johnny was the one for him. Wyatt let Gina know and they divorced. However, they're still good friends and she is the mother of his child, so she continued to live with him as he courted Johnny. Last time we played this save, Wyatt and Johnny were married outside of a closet in a nightclub, so Wyatt needs some more space. Not only is Johnny moving in, but so is Johnny's adopted son Chaz, who is a teenager. So for this build, I face the challenge of creating a home big enough for 2 adults and 2 children, and a separate space for Gina so she doesn't have to live in the same house as her ex and his new husband. Alas, we had no room in the budget for cats, or even a fully finished living room, but we could discuss that later. I first put everything into the household inventory and deleted everything but the rocket. I was concerned about the rocket glitching in the inventory after putting so many upgrades on it. Then the first 4 boxes were meant to be spaces for Elena, Chaz, Gina, and Wyatt and Johnny. I did end up moving their spaces around a bit, but their rooms were placed first since I knew we had a limited budget. I was originally thinking of making Gina's mother-in-law suite as wide as her rocket, but I need the money, so she gets a pretty thin suite in the end. We're living large by not only having a separate suite for Gina, but also a second floor. Unfortunately for me, I forgot to place the bathroom on the first floor initially. Womp womp. So I had to rearrange the bottom floor a bit until it kind of worked. I did miss something, but I'll see if you catch it before the end of the video. I did remember the bathroom on the second floor, though, so small mercies. I did not realize it was an asymmetrical build at first, so that had me rearranging things a bit more. I wanted to put a private balcony on the second floor, but I had limited space to place a door without it being in either the office or the music room upstairs. But there was a nice bump out that I used in the back once I made that first floor symmetrical. I think a mistake I made with this build was to give it those roofs. It's not an area that gets a lot of rain, and I think platform roofs would have better suited the area. I'll have to revisit the idea for the next rebuild, and I do like the idea of putting the solar roof on though. So maybe a long and gently sloped roof is the way to go. I took a ridiculously long time deciding what to use for the outside wallpaper for both structures. At least for Gina's house, the idea came to me to make it look like the shipping container her rocket parts arrived in, so a red shipping container box it became, at least on the outside. I attempted to reuse the windows we originally had on our house, but they just weren't working as well with the shipping container aesthetic. Instead of making it seem roomier, the large shipping container door and wall-sized windows seemed to shrink the livable space. Luckily, we already had most of Gina's bedroom saved in the household inventory. We kept her bunk bed and placed her computer setup under it, after a quick recoloring. Instead of the darker color space design, pink and airy seemed to be the name of the game for this remodel. I blame Elena. Since I was already in the household inventory, I decided to continue emptying it out, and promptly got distracted by wanting to fix the first floor layout again. I decided to turn the back middle room into a kitchen instead, since we had that weird bump out that would be perfect as a fridge niche. Of course, this also meant I needed to have a door to the outside from this part of the house too. It would make Gina visiting Elena and vice versa much easier. I tried to cut out as much of the fiddling as I could when it came to simple door placement choice, but it took longer than I cared to admit. I then continued to clear out the household inventory, trying to get an idea of what we had to work with. We were already down to less than 13K, and I was getting concerned about actually filling the house with usable things. The bathroom is nearly identical, so it didn't make the final cut. You'll see it at the end. I then attempted to put all the kitchen stuff away, but had a minor issue with the fact that the household inventory resembles the debug inventory, scattered about like my attention. And then the cabinets did not want to cabinet. It was fun times. I don't know how the corner cabinet managed to end up diagonal to the walls, but it happened. After fighting with them for several minutes, I gave up and sold them to buy new. It wasn't worth the stress. I finally remembered to put lights in the build because I saw them lurking in the inventory, so about now you should be able to see what I'm doing in addition to listening to me wax poetic about my own fables and flaws. After mostly finishing the kitchen, I moved on to extraditing Elena's things from the depths of the inventory. Since she was already short on things due to sharing a room with her mother previously, I decided to splurge and get her a giant cat stuffy. That completed, I once again tackled the task of figuring out which wallpaper to use on the outside of the build, and decided to go for an expensive white stucco, and then figured out which outside doors went well with it. I had originally placed a rustic door in the kitchen as a placeholder, and then I found out that all the best looking doors were 2 tiles wide, not 1, and I wasn't redoing my kitchen. I finally found a 6-paneled glass painted door that matched the upstairs one well enough. My concerns about money were only growing at this point, so I used expensive wallpaper and flooring on every surface available to give myself a buffer. I also put in the porches and elevated the house a bit so I could pay for stairs. I also had to even out the symmetry for the front of the house too. Go figure. It was finally time for windows, and I started with some questionable choices. The bottom floor windows were giving me a hard time, and I knew I wanted to line up small windows on the second floor. It was around this time I really started to dislike how this whole thing looked, but I sunk time into this and I wasn't going to stop, darn it. I moved away from white on white windows to gray on white windows and long skinny ones to make the house seem less squatty, but the house still looks a bit like an albino toad that spent its youth in a nuclear waste polluted swamp. I put the kitchen window from the inside so I actually knew where the sink was and placed one of the blinds I already had. After careful consideration, I decided to give up and just mirror the back windows to the front. Like all good architects, I'm sure. I'm positive I'm going to get a call from the House Hunters guys to be on their show soon. I debated between single or double windows for each side of the house, while I actually placed the expensive flooring I had intended to do ages ago. I had so little left that after that, I decided to finish making Gina's place functional before anything else. I had to get relatively cheap appliances, so I imagined these were leftovers from the first ones Wyatt bought, and that large door was getting in the way of everything, so it had to go. I did let her have the same counters as the main house, even though it was expensive. I moved the bed and desk outside while I rearranged the inside a bit more. The bathroom was all sorts in the way, so I turned it from a 2x2 to a 1x3 and just left a sink in the kitchen. I picked a red door that still suited the mood of the place without being so obscenely large. I also intentionally deleted the large bedroom window without remembering it later, so this build gets a grand total of 1 door to the outside and 1 window. After a brief stint of panic, because for some strange reason The Sims 4 can only hope to justify, all of my household inventory save for the Christmas tree went missing. I reloaded the lot and thankfully the items returned themselves, and I emptied the inventory as quickly as possible. I was flirting with a budget of less than 1K at this point and feeling it. I took a moment to try and remember what the feng shui guy on YouTube said about how you should lay your bed in your room, but then gave it up because I don't think Sims have feng shui. I also decided to go for single windows at that point. Since I used the reclaimed wood flooring and wallpaper in Gina's space, I decided to bring it through to the main house as well. I remembered that Johnny didn't like our dining table or chairs, so I put them in Gina's container. I figured that once Elena was old enough, they could have breakfast or something there as mommy and me time. I nearly put the TV above Wyatt's bed instead of in the living room. It went on the only wall space big enough for it, which determined where the couch landed. I, in my infinite optimism, thought that the sofa could stay against the wall, and I would be able to afford a new couch to fill out the living room. Do you happen to see how many simoleons I was working with at the time? I found some odds and ends for the bedrooms, like curtains and Elena's Wabbit tablet. I fought with the curtains for a while before finally getting them to place where I wanted them. I repainted Elena's room a couple of times and changed the color of the curtains that I had placed there. As I was placing the paintings in the music room, I noticed that the curtains were clipping through. I would have shown the speed build of the music room and the office, but honestly, there's nothing to see. I placed the paintings we needed for aspiration and changed the wallpaper and flooring. There was a dilemma. Chaz needed a bedroom, but I had less than 2K to furnish it with, and no previously used furniture to repurpose. So I went about trying to find the cheap wallpaper in hopes of regaining some funds. I chose this dusky rose for Wyatt's bedroom, which is honestly weird. Again, I blame Elena. Pink is not my normally preferred color scheme. The kitchens and bathroom were tiled. The main kitchen kept the same tile, but Gina's ended up with the new base game tile. The living room and hallway got the same cheap wallpaper as Wyatt's room, but in a neutral light blue, and I wasted some of my budget on a wall for the stairs on the hallway side. The expensive flooring was the next thing to be replaced. At that point, I had a workable amount of money to furnish Chaz's room. Too bad I know practically nothing about him. Creating a teenager room for a sim I don't know was challenging, and I'm not up to the task of divining his likes and dislikes, nor did I pause building to go look at him in chaos. Therefore, he got a rather boring room. I got fighting with the curtains again. I'm not sure why I gave him a bunk bed when I knew we really didn't have money to fill up the space, but I did. He also inherited Gina's grand prize from the second geekathon she attended. I had realized after my last rebuild that I had sold her first prize and reset the money because I thought she had brought it with her from her original home. I'm not going to give that money back to the household though. I'm counting it as an inattention tax. I played with the idea of having his desk not under his bed to take up more space in the room for a while. After moving a painting downstairs, I even gave Chaz some more curtains, this time to cover up the huge triple window looking out to the sidewalk. Now he has some pretend privacy. I splurged and put up some columns around the stairs to separate the space a bit better. Shh, don't tell them they could have gotten more of a living room. After putting some railing on the stairs, I decided I had enough wiggle room to furnish the upstairs bathroom, the only completed furnished room on the second floor. Unless you count the balcony with the woodworking table. Next up on the list was the foundation, and I didn't keep the stone foundation I originally chose. I ended up switching to a stucco to match the walls. That decision was made after fighting with the stairs and front porch fencing for a while. There's a stone wall that I kind of liked, but it looked so awkward hanging off the foundation, and the stairs hiding behind it. I thought about a glass fence for a hot second in the front, gave up. Thought about it again after changing the stairs and foundation. Stuck my tongue out at it, and went to look at some get-together fencing in a similar gray to the windows. Except the side windows. I just realized I left those white. Oops. The bit of an awkward separation of foundation and house can be covered up once we can afford housing. I'm sure that you can tell my scattered way of doing things was missing some key details of a normal house. I bet even the sharp-witted among you have already named the entire room that I forgot to place, or at least entire couple of pieces of furniture that most people get in their first apartments after a usable bed. There's no dining room in the main house. There's no dining table in the main house. It looks like all aging up is going to have to be done from the kitchen to counters. It's not the worst thing to forget, but I've played in so many tiny houses that I forget they exist sometimes. Also, when I lived alone, I never used a dining table for myself. Having finished those projects, I decided to go back and try to give Chaz's room a little bit more personality. I played with carpets and chose what I think is a holiday one. I think I might be trolling Chaz, but at least he ends up with a dresser and a small stack of books to read. With less than 100 simoleons left, I turned my attention to what terrain paint could do for me. I made a pathway from the main house to Gina's place, and solidified the ground beneath the rocket ship. If nothing else, I can imagine that sand would have turned to glass by now, so I'm pretending that the ground beneath the rocket ship has always been stone. I also did the terrain paint around the foundation trick. I'm sure that you can tell that I'm not the best with terrain paint. The lines are just quite distinct from one type of terrain to another with very little blending. And I have to admit that part of that was that it was getting late and my spoons were quickly dropping one by one. I do an awful lot of talking to other people on Mondays, and my poor introverted heart needed some solitude. Last up was odds and ends. A few color changes in Wyatt's room makes it look solidly like a Valentine's Day card. I also added a few lights on the balcony. We're lucky we don't need an outside trash can since the money trash can just eats everything and spits money back out. Man, I wish I had one of those in real life. Finally, here's our semi-final build. It's functional, if a bit ugly, and, well, it is what we have to work with until we get some more money. Thanks for watching. I'll post a new speed build once we earn enough to fix the atrocity we have created. Bye-bye!